This is Dick Alberini. I'm the curator of the Littleton Historical Museum, and we're here with Win Merrill, a longtime resident of the town, and he's consented to share a lot of memories with us. But before we move forward on this, a couple things I'd like to mention about the museum is that we're open on Wednesdays, and starting in the summer, we'll be open on Saturdays. Admission is free. It's air-conditioned. It's a large museum, 3,800 square feet. Also, we will be doing a history walk on the first and third Fridays of July, August, September, and October. 6 o'clock at the at the tourist information booth, and I will be there. We will be basically reconstructing Littleton over the past 160 years and some of the neat stories that we have. So that's my advertisement for this. So before I get going again, we'll go ahead with and talk with Win. I'd like to introduce Win Merrill.
How you doing?
All right.
Yeah.
And thank you very much for being here. It's a pleasure to have you, and always a pleasure to have you come down here. He has the best stories. All right. So I have a question, Win. How long have you lived in Littleton?
Well, I lived in Littleton 90 years, 11 months, and a few more days in Littleton. I was born July 3rd, 1925, in my grandfather's house on the Carter Huntoon's home on the Lisbon Road. The house now is situated where the bridge is on the Lisbon Road that goes over the interstate, and it was on the northeast corner. It was a big house that he built, I believe, around the early 1900s, and this is where I was born. I was a small baby. They'd only 2 pounds 10 ounces, and they put me in a little shoebox for my crib for the first few days because I was so small, and Dr. Raymond Giles and Miss Lafferty were the attendants that delivered me. It seems quite a long time ago. I still have a little calendar here of 1925 that when I was born. But that is the number of years that I've lived in Littleton.
Wow. I imagine you've seen a lot of changes over the years.
Oh, yes, I have. Especially on the Meadow, I was always brought up on the Meadow. I lived for a while after that at where the Hadlock Insurance House is, and then also at the farm, the Merrill farm is across from the 99 restaurant down on the Meadow.
Now, we should probably let the viewers know that the Meadow is where Home Depot, Lowe's, and Walmart is located, for those who don't know the term.
That's right. That's the farm that I was brought up in. A lot of the time, was right across from where the 99 restaurant is now on the Meadow. Many things were done down there on the Meadow that today it is so much different. So many changes. And of course we used to have a farm with 20 milking cows and 15 heifers or young stock, and hens, pigs, you name it, chickens and hens. Used to sell eggs, and also did a lot of gardening and sold vegetables at the stores. Vegetables went to Magoon's Grocery in Littleton, A&P, the First National, Sinclair Hotel in Bethlehem, Heifers Market in Bethlehem, Louis Bernardi, and Thayer's Hotel here in Littleton, besides some of the restaurants. It really is quite a change from what it used to be.
So the Meadow has really changed over the years.
It has, yeah, that's right. And it's seen so much progress, and it has brought in traffic that it's unbelievable. We never had any traffic on the Lisbon Road. My cousin from Concord, New Hampshire, they would come up during the summertime, and we'd sit on the lawn and wait for cars to come by. Sometimes it would be a Packard or a Buick, and we'd try to name what that auto was that was coming. And but we had to wait a long time before any cars went by. So much different what it is now today. We have, I don't know how many traffic lights down there on the meadow, leading to the meadow. And it's really it's a big change.
Big change. How did you folks get around back then? There were so few automobiles, like going, using the Lisbon Road. So how was the main transportation that?
Well, we had automobiles. I can remember back in the early 30s when they put a cement road in, they had a steam shovel and a big roller, a big steam roller that built the new concrete road that was put in. And we did have automobiles. There was a few wagons, but we were coming of the automobile age then. So it was.
That's great.
Yeah.
You were telling me a story when you first arrived here today about your father played basketball.
No, my uncle played.
Oh, your uncle played basketball.
No, my father was the manager of one of the baseball teams, I guess, back in 1915.
All right.
And I remember of them telling about one trip that they took from the high school. It was a basketball game on the, I can't remember the exact date, but I think it was the 22nd of January, and it was against St. Johnsbury. And they took the sleigh. They had 3 sleighs that left Littleton in the afternoon. And I think there was about 3:30 in the afternoon, and 22 below zero that afternoon and evening as they started their trip to St. Johnsbury. The sleigh here, an original copy of the sleigh that they used is right here in the museum, and the buffalo robe that they took and covered themselves with that going over to St. Johnsbury. The one thing about it was that they had a soapstone, the pieces of soapstone, which they heated, and that kept their feet warm. But it must have been really an adventure getting over to St. Johnsbury to play that game, and they did lose that game to St. Johnsbury. They had won the previous one when they played it in Littleton, but they lost that game, and there was a person there that gave them hot chocolate and place to warm up before they left the game to come back to Littleton. But they didn't get back to Littleton until 4 o'clock in the
morning.
Next morning. So it was a long trip going to basketball games. And they also, of course, in those days, they went by basketball games to Lisbon and Lancaster by the trains and by sleigh.
Now, and you also told me that the person who gave them the hot coffee and the chocolate and the donuts was Mrs. Fairbanks.
Yes.
So she opened up her home to the basketball players
that's
to
right.
Give them some warm beverage to hopefully hold them over on probably, probably a 3-hour drive, 4-hour sleigh ride back.
Yes, because of course the horses, they were pulling, but they were. But the idea of just trying to keep warm is what I think was. But I know my father telling about it to me, and also it's in the old 1950 record, the books.
The record was the Littleton High School
publications, right?
It was their yearbook. Would come out twice a year, if I remember.
Yes, two or three times a year.
At that time, yeah. Now, what did you do for work when you started work? What did you do for jobs in town, or where did you work?
Well, I worked, of course, I started working at the farm when I was about 12 years old. We had an old model Ford that I used to ride around the fields with, and we pulled an old hay rake behind that with my cousin usually sitting dumping the hay, and I'd drive the little old truck. And I think, I used to get a nickel or a dime if I would lead the horse for a neighbor to doing cultivation in their gardens, hilling up the potatoes and beans and things like that. So I didn't get much money at all, but of course times were a little bit hard, and I was appreciative of any nickel or anything, and I still will today, where I'll still bend over to pick up a penny. But my father, he worked for his father at the farm, and he got $25 a month. But we did get our milk, and we got our wood along with that. So it seems like a very low wage, but he also was an Eastern States grain representative, which later was Agway. But he used to get a carload of grain come in on the siding over the railroad track. He'd get orders from different farmers. I believe there was around 35 to 50 farmers that he got orders for grain, and he'd go into the bank and get a loan from the bank, and then he'd go over to the freight office, and they would come back and break the seal, and we'd open up the freight car with the grain. And that grain was 100 pounds in these burlap bags.
Yeah.
And I can remember helping on that. They seemed awful heavy, and a lot of times you'd have to be at the end of the car, and you'd have to lift the hen feed up over cow feed to get it to the customers as they came to the door. We didn't have a store to sell. We just sold it off in the car, the train, and at the farm we just carried a surplus that we needed, or anybody would run out, we'd have that. But that would come in once a month, the grain, sometimes 1 or 2 carloads of that. And but then, of course, we raised vegetables, and we sold the vegetables and things like that. But the main thing was a dairy farm.
Great.
That we had.
So what else did you do as you got older, as you married and raised? What other jobs did you do in your after the farm?
Well, after the World War II, I was married in 1946, and they didn't have quite enough money at the farm to pay me for a wage, actually, so I did get a job at the Littleton Hardware, and I was a clerk in the hardware for 5 years, and I really enjoyed that. I had worked previously when I was in school at the outlet store doing clerking, and I guess I always was interested in people on Main Street, and that's why that I like clerking very much.
Now, you told me at the hardware store you had a very famous customer that you waited on.
Yes, I did. She was famous as far as an actress. That was Betty Davis. She and her mother Ruth came in to the hardware, and they were looking for baby scales. And this was back in 1947. And I showed her the baby scales, and she was very rude to her mother. And I always remember this. She really was not kind words to her mother that I expected it should be. And of course, Betty had been married 4 times. This was Grant Sherry, I believe, was the husband that she was pregnant with, and at the time when she was going to buy these baby scales. And she, of course, later delivered Barbara out in Santa Ana, California. And that was May 1st, I think, of 1947.
And did you ever know her, let's say, I believe it was her third husband, Arthur Farnsworth?
Arthur Farnsworth, yes, yeah, he was. Of course, they said, too, that either from alcohol or some way that he fell down the stairs and he got killed. And
now, I had read where he had tripped actually going down the stairs, and 2 or 3 weeks later he suffered from an aneurysm. He had suffered a concussion.
That's right. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And Betty had said that that marriage probably would have stuck because she was really quite taken with Arthur. He was her favorite.
Yeah.
He was local boy.
Yeah.
Local boy, worked at what was the hotel? Peckett's.
Mm-hmm.
Peckett's up in Sugar Hill.
Yeah. One thing she did say, if she ever married again, that she married a man that had $1 million and that he would only live 6 months. So you see, Betty was after she died, she left an inheritance of between $600,000 and $1 million, and none of it went to the daughter. She had 2 daughters,
right?
But she left it all to one of the sons.
Yes, yeah, and her son's a lawyer in Boston.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. Okay, that's great. That's great. Did you have any relatives? Now, we've talked about a few things, and one of my favorite topics is the Civil War. And we have on display here items that belong to a relative of yours who was a Union soldier in the Civil War.
That's right. No, I had a number of grandparents that were in the Civil War. James Merrill, who lived up on the North Littleton Road, he was in the Civil War. He was wounded at Fort Reno. And then my grandmother, Bishop, Cassie Bishop Merrill, and her father served in the Civil War and served in many battles, Fredericksburg, and many of the battles in Virginia. And also I did go back a little bit further in my history, that I've had some of my great-grandfathers were in the French and Indian War. One's on the Huntoon side, that was my mother's side of the branch. They were in the Revolutionary War and the War of 1812, and Captain Whiting, and then he was fought in the Battle of Bunker Hill and also Bennington. He was in some of the stacks of the stack troops that were in Bennington.
Wow, that's...
So I did have quite a number of my relatives, great-grandparents. And did I ever tell you about we got the town history here of Littleton for the first settler that came to Littleton, who was Nathan Caswell.
Right.
And he is related to my grandmother, Cassie Bishop Merrill. Cassie was the 13th child of Nathan Caswell.
Really?
And she married Samuel Bishop of Lisbon, and they while they were in Littleton, and then they moved to Landaff, and they're buried down to the Benton Cemetery down in Benton, New Hampshire. And I found the stones a couple of years ago, and it was interesting to finding where they were buried.
Nice.
But,
Wow, that's fascinating.
I go back to quite a little of the history of Littleton, and I've always enjoyed history and geography. I used to collect stamps. When I was I went to the St. Rose Parochial School, Littleton. We had 8 grades there, and 1931 I started, and I finished on time in 1939, and I enjoyed that. The Sisters of Mercy were very good teachers, and I do try to. One thing that they did insist on was Palmer method of penmanship.
Penmanship.
And
I
know that today I still make the old I's and the T's like they used to do back years ago. And but this is one thing I enjoyed. I enjoyed going to the school. The school then was located on the corner of Jackson and High Street.
That was that was the original church.
That was the original Catholic Church.
That was the original
Catholic
Church.
The new stone church was built. Yeah, and they had one thing. They burnt coal in the furnace, and they had a lot of cinders in the playground. I wore knickers until I got into the 8th grade, which I detested because I wanted long pants, but my mother, she always bought the knickers, and I wore knickers. So many of my knickers, the knees of them were worn out because I played in the rough cinders that we used to play King of the Mountain or marbles or something like that. And I was a little rough, and I got my pants torn a good many times.
Wow. You know, one thing to mention is he mentioned the new St. Rose Church. That was built in 1913.
Yeah.
So, you know, it was right after 1913 that they took the old St. Rose Church, which I think was built in the 1870s, and turned it into the school. Mm-hmm. What happened to that building?
That was torn down, and they built a new brick school a few years.
Yeah.
I know my children went to some of the old school and some of the new school there.
Now, where did you go to high school? You went through 8th grade at St. Rose.
I went to Littleton High School, which is not too much different today than what. Looking at the front side, on the High Street side, you look at it, and it looks just about the same as it used to back before the fire. That they had a big fire, but I went there for the 4 years. I was in plays and managed a baseball team. We had a good winter sports team, and a lot of fun. I enjoyed it, and enjoyed being a graduate of Littleton High School.
What year did you graduate?
I graduated in 1943.
Right at the beginning, right at the in the midst of
that's right.
Second World War.
We had many that went into the service at that time. In fact, we had 4 boys that went in before graduation, and I spoke with one about a few years ago, Kenneth Gold from Littleton. He lived down in Luray, Virginia, mm-hmm. and we had a good time talking, reminiscing about the old days back when we graduated before 43.
Wow, that's great. Now, you remember most of your years, your teenage years, and your elementary school years were during the Great Depression.
That's right.
And Franklin Roosevelt was president at that time.
Yes, that's right. When the start of the Depression came back in 29, Herbert Hoover was president, and I can remember people then, and it was very difficult. Between 29 and 33, it was many people were committing suicide that had money, especially that lived in the cities. We were very fortunate in the Littleton area that we didn't have the much money to invest like some of the people in the cities did. And but it was very difficult. Of course, bread was only 7 cents a loaf. Gas was only 10 cents a gallon. Think what it is today. On an automobile, a Plymouth automobile was $650, and Studebaker, little four-door car, Studebakers were, and they were also $650 that you could buy a brand new one for.
Wow.
Think what it is today.
Yeah. Now, during that time, your family obviously having the farm.
That's right. They were
You did.
pretty well set
You were
because
set, yeah.
a lot of people, of course, had hens and chickens and maybe one or two cows, and they lived off from the land. So it was easier for the people in the Littleton area then, because we didn't have to worry about financial things like. But it was very hard for people with the Great Depression, and it hurt a good many people.
Now, what kind of industry, when you were growing up, what kind of industry do you remember?
Well, the Saranac Glove Company was one of the biggest industries. We had the Hawley Shoe Company, which produced shoes for Sears and Roebuck. We had the Norton Pike Abrasive Company. Norton Pike was they had quite a few orders, government orders during World War II,
Mm-hmm.
and then Saranac did some too, but the Norton Pike, they had shifts around the clock, and Saranac, of course, they didn't, but one thing I remember about the Saranac glove was that they had a steam horn that would blow at noontime. So we at the farm could hear that, and we knew it was dinner time. So that was a good, and we also had the fire alarm blow, and the fire whistle would blow, and I miss that today.
That was when my wife and I first moved to Littleton. Okay, we had we remember the fire whistle, and that was something of our childhood back in Massachusetts, and we lived on Union Street, and you could hear the fire whistle all the way down on Union Street when it was noon, and it's one of those memories.
Right, and what I miss, one of the things I missed was the old train whistles. They used to blow at the crossings. You'd hear it, and you'd look over from my house. We'd look over and see the freight trains going by and the passenger trains. These big Pullman trains that used to go up as far as the Fabians and bring back summer people to New York City. It really was something to see. And see the hobos that would be clinging to the bottom of these rail cars. How they ever were able to stay on these tracks. Rail cars is beyond me. Some of them, of course, would be in an empty car, and we'd see them when we were unloading grain up at the siding there at the Boston, Maine. But one thing I too remember from my grandmother Huntoon, she used to have one or two hobos that would come to the door and ask for food. And they were regulars that came every year, and she would fix a little plate of dinner for them, and they would go out. They wouldn't come in, but they would go out, sit on the porch, and have their dinner. And then they'd thank her, and they'd go on their way. She'd see them again, maybe, the next year. But I always remember that, and how trusting people were then.
At that time, sure.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Sure. I mean, and for the younger generation who may be watching this, you may have heard the term hobo, and you may not have. Today we call them homeless people.
That's right. Mm-hmm.
And they were put into situations where they didn't have work because America during the Depression had 25% unemployment, which was extremely high.
That's right.
And so these men went from place to place looking for work. and doing whatever they could do to work.
That's why Franklin Roosevelt, he started the CCC programs here in northern New Hampshire.
That's right.
And here we had many that belonged to the CCCs, the Conservation Corps.
Yeah, Civilian
They
Conservation
built
Corps.
trails and things on the mountains side.
Right. There was another story you told me about the Dells, that a lot of people don't realize that our Dells area, the pond in it, used to be, the pond was huge, and it used to be about 30, 35 feet deep.
That's right. No, now it has started that the land has moved so that but the Dells was very, very deep. There was 2 boys that lost their lives in that pond. My mother, she'd never let me go up there. I used to sneak up there sometimes and take my fish pole, and I would, but these 2 boys lost their lives. In fact, my neighbor, Jimmy Bowles, that lived where the McDonald Trailer Park was, he was very instrumental in trying to save one of the boys, but it was too late, and the 2 boys drowned. And but the 38 hurricane there in the Dells, it blew an awful lot of the pine trees down like it did Remick Park, and we had a tremendous amount of pine trees that I think it was, I'm not sure on the date, but I think it was September 19th of 1938 that this windstorm came up through the Long Island and the Connecticut River Valley, and we had a tremendous amount of trees down. We had a lot of trees down in our area there on the Lisbon Road, and also on the Main Street in Littleton. A lot of the elm trees that were uprooted on Main Street, and but we had a tremendous amount of pine and birch on the higher elevation of the mountain behind us, and I remember the hurricane pretty much. It was we were staying at the farm that time due to my grandmother passing. I was in the bedroom at night, and the windows that on the farmhouse that were right next to where the 99 restaurant is, they blew in the glass, and the sash blew right into the room. Wow. Fortunately, my sister, she was away at UNH going to college. She was not in the room, but my father and I, we had to try to patch up and put blankets over the broken sash and glass in that room. But I can still remember that noise of that thunder, not thunder, but the wind blowing in the sash on the glass.
Wow.
But in the Parker Barns, and next to it where the Mascoma Bank was, there was that part of that roof of the big barn was torn right through to the opposite side. And they had a big hole in there, probably it was 15 or 20 feet big. They really, the wind did a tremendous job in the area. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So.
Wow. One thing about the Dells drowning, I want to go back to the Dells. I'd read the obituary about the 2 boys. We have it here, and at the museum, and they were brothers.
Yes.
And one of the brothers, they were going to swim across the pond, and one of the brothers didn't make it. The other one went to save him, and he was pulled down, and they found the 2 boys. When the fire went, they found them under 35 feet of water. That's how deep the Dells Pond was at one time. Now it's silted in because of all the building and it's brought all that loose soil down. It's filling in.
There used to be an ice house right on the edge of that too. I can remember the foundation that was there. I think Kilburn probably had it when when Kilburn had the farm there.
Right. The Kilburn farm was up right in the middle of Route 93.
Yes, right. Mm-hmm.
Right.
It was on the old Dells Road.
On the old Dells Road.
Yeah.
Right. Well, do you have anything else you'd like to share with us?
Well, I've really enjoyed talking about Littleton and the way it used to be, and I really enjoy Bob McConaughey's work that he's done on Channel 2 and it's something to bring to the people of Littleton all the information that he brings, and you, Dick, have done such a wonderful job on the museum, bringing out all the old parts and all your helpers that you have had that really have got this information together, and it's a wonderful place to come to, and I hope that everyone can come and visit this museum.
Thank you, and I hope everyone can come and visit the museum. Remember, open on Wednesdays from 10 to 2. We'll be open on Saturdays starting in July from 10 to 2 or 10 to 1. Admission is free. We have a lot of great stuff down here to see and a lot of Littleton history. Thank you for watching. Thank you.